So, where do we begin? I was going to say at the start, but where's the start? I guess let's begin here. Let's begin here and now. So, yeah, it would be good to communicate maybe a little bit about wisdom and compassion on this path of awakening. So, yeah, there's, you could say, wisdom on one hand, compassion on the other hand, and this perfect union of wisdom and compassion, which is the awakened heart mind. And it's a beautiful dance of seeing and acting, clarity, and being, you could say, being in the world. And the reason I want to talk about wisdom and compassion is because often the compassion side isn't really spoken about very much in, a lot of contemporary, talks, videos. I've seen quite a lot of non-duality videos, which are really beautifully made, really beautifully expounded. And they talk about, well, they're very wisdom focused, which is fantastic, because it kind of focuses on the clear seeing, the insights into non-dual states, awakening, enlightenment, which free us from delusion. So often they will dig into the particulars of the illusion of the self, and then seeing through that illusion, seeing that there is no self apart from the world, no self apart from each other. And it's an incredible insight. It's a necessary and very beautiful insight to have on this path of awakening, this insight that there is no self, and then for it to be fully realized, to be fully embodied, for it to be part of the ongoing experience of this life, that there is experience but no experiencer. There is the multitude but not separate. There is form, apparent form, the form of myself, the form of others, yet ultimately unbound and formless. But the reason I mention compassion as well is because certainly in my experience, and I think in the experience a lot of teachings from the past, and also from people that I know that have woken up, the way in which this clarity of insight, this wisdom, you could call it, as I am calling it, of no self, arises naturally in the world of form, in the world of being, is through spontaneous compassionate action. So you could say on the one hand, you have the seeing. We see through the illusion of separation. We see through the illusion of a separate self and others. We see through the illusion of concrete form. And we recognize that absolutely it is not true that we are separate from each other. However, that doesn't discount the fact that relatively we are in the world with apparent other beings, and we're living a life of relationship. See, often in videos or talks on non-duality, let's say, or the Dharma, they talk about the end of relationship. And in one absolute way, that is true. That is, it's felt deeply that this is all existing, all happening as a unified whole. And yet we see clearly, moment by moment, day to day, the relationship between apparent beings, animals, life forms, forms in general. And it seems to be that relationship, that being, which is the dance or the play of emptiness. This is how empty nature, empty truth manifests in life in relation to itself through apparent form. So why do I say this? Well, when we focus purely on the clear seeing, wisdom, or insight into the way that things are, moment by moment, the cutting through of delusion, we can unbind very deeply from the chains that chains us to conditions, conditioned existence, apparent things arising and ceasing that we take to be ourselves and others. So this wisdom, insight can cut through those chains, unbind us, and free us from suffering. But then at some point in the realization process, it's felt that what's left then from this place of no self is a being in the world which is spontaneously available to the forms and the relationships and the people, to the things, I say things, to the events, which aren't really events, but the phenomena that's happening. And yeah, and so through this insight of wisdom, through this clear seeing that there is no separation, the heart is then invited to remain open in the world of being, in this world, the world of relationship, the relational, the relative, you can call it what you want, the world of form. Through absolutely knowing that we are free from the identification of form and self, then we are also free to engage the world of form, the world of self and others, with open-hearted availability. And what that open-hearted availability looks like in practice is spontaneous, compassionate engagement, almost like this interpersonal, if you're going to use those terms, interpersonal dance of compassion. So when I, this being, meets another that's maybe suffering or is engaged in some kind of turmoil or just engaged in life, if I'm grounded in being, grounded in open, non-dual nature, then my heart is available to meet them where they're at. And it can meet them with full availability and full unconditional love, unconditional positive regard and availability. And what that looks like is an absolute acknowledgement of their suffering in my heart, in my experience. And through that acknowledgement, compassion arises. So it's not that compassion's manufactured in any way. It's said, in certain Buddhist scriptures that when metta, which is unconditional loving kindness, availability, love, meets suffering, compassion arises. Naturally, it's a natural process. So when my heart is open and available, and my being, this organism is free from delusion and operates in a world with total availability, then when I meet others or I meet suffering in a world, there's nothing to separate me from it. And my heart then is free to meet it with absolute acceptance, total availability. Compassion arises, and then action born from that compassion. You could say maybe even that the compassion that arises is the activity. So when the loving heart meets suffering, the arising of compassion manifests in the world as action, compassionate action. Now, how that looks is different all the time. Depending on who you speak to, depending on the situation that you're in. It may be that your pet has undergone an injury and they're suffering maybe like towards the end of their life. So when that's met fully in the moment and I see that suffering in my pet, the animal that I love, then my heart opens and blossoms, and I'm able to meet their suffering without any clinging or need or diversion, any kind of pulling away or moving towards, and I can just be available to them in the moment and act spontaneously yet compassionately. And this is a gift. This is a real, it's a real gift, because this feels like the mechanism through which life truly manifests from undivided nature. So when I'm grounded and fully embodied in the truth of my being, the truth of my nature, I'm free to be with anything, with anyone, with any situation. And that is a joy. Now, the reason I mention this in detail is because I don't hear it mentioned very much. I hear a lot of people talking about the clarity of wisdom, the clear seeing of the formless, empty nature of life and the emptiness of this organism of a self, and how that brings about liberation and liberation from suffering, you could say, freedom from suffering. But it's not the mind that is freed through this path of liberation. I'm just altering some settings. There we go, it's a bit better. Ooh. Yeah, it's not the mind that's freed necessarily through this path of awakening. It's the heart. It's the awakening of the heart and the liberation of the heart. So it's the awakening of being to be free, for the heart to be free, to be with all situations, the entire smorgasbord of life as it arises and ceases, all people, all beings, all apparent things, and be completely available so that we can meet it with spontaneity, intuition, and wisdom can then move through us as life. Wisdom that knows itself. You could use the term Dharma aware of its own nature, which is a term that I particularly like. But yeah, another term you could say is Prajna Paramita. So in Buddhist texts, this means the perfection of wisdom, often. So the perfection of wisdom is that clearest of seeing where no being is there to attach to anything, and you dwell or are able to dwell effortlessly in absolute open availability, true nature. But the perfection of wisdom cannot be separated. It's like this from the perfection of compassionate action. Wisdom and compassion, right here, are, they're Yam-Yub, as they would describe in Tibetan Buddhism, interpenetrating. There is no separation between the wisdom that sees and the compassion that acts. The clear seeing of insight manifests truly when the seeing is truly clear, when wisdom has truly been perfected, not by anyone, but by presence. It manifests in the world as compassion. And knowing this is a beautiful way to orient practice as you move into deeper stages of realization. Because what it allows us to do is to really look at how we act and behave in this world of forms, this world of relationship, the relative world of apparent self and others. We can know that it's absolutely not the case that there is a separate self and there are separate others. And yet we can still feel how we engage as an apparent self with apparent others. And we can see, actually, is my heart open to all that arises? Do I have the capacity and the availability and the presence to meet all people in all situations with open-hearted availability? And are my actions seen as compassionate? Not seen by others. I don't mean as in like, do people see me as a compassionate being? with the perfection of wisdom is an absolute knowing of the way things are, which means I know what I am doing. I know the states that I am in. I have a knowing of the way this experience is, and I can know what my behaviors are in the relative world. I can know how I have treated people. I can know very clearly whether my heart closed for a moment. I met a situation or a person that wasn't ideal, and I felt a flinch, and I felt a closing, and then there was an almost imperceptible moving away, a moving away from the person and the situation, or a moving towards a more pleasurable situation. So yeah, knowing that compassion really for the open heart is infinitely available. The open heart, because it doesn't cling, it doesn't attach, it doesn't grasp, will always be available to meet suffering with compassion. So we can see that in our own actions. And it's really good way, or I feel that it's a really good way for life to continue to show me how the fruition of awakening, especially in deep stage awakening, can continue. And I can, well, it seems like it will continue forever, for the rest of this life, the rest of this human manifestation, because there will always be situations whereby, I as a being will meet others that are suffering. And then I have the opportunity to remain in the depth of presence, truly knowing my nature, and meeting others with absolute availability, completely allowing others to be as they are without the need to fix, but giving them my complete presence and allowing compassion to arise again and again and again. And this is, it would be wrong of me not to say this is challenging. It is. It's challenging, but it's the most beautiful challenge you could ever meet. It's the challenge of life, which is me, to live up to its full potential of being truly alive and meeting other life, with a loving heart. So yeah, I could say, I probably will say a lot more about this because this is my first video. So it's a subject. Compassion and open-hearted, loving presence is a subject that's very dear to me, and it's dear to me not as someone who attaches to those things, but it's dear to me because it feels like there's a deep truth embedded in that way of being. So it feels like it would probably be good to maybe stop there right now, but yeah, maybe there'll be another video next time about the Heart Sutra. So the Heart Sutra relates directly to this relationship of open-hearted, loving presence of compassion and the perfection of wisdom. The Heart Sutra is called the Heart of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. So it is the absolute essence and core of Prajnaparamita, the perfection of wisdom. And it is expounded by the Bodhisattva of compassion, Avalokiteshvara. So it's such a beautiful and rich area to expose and to dig into and to talk about the Heart Sutra, because it still to this day has a lasting impact. So stay tuned. Bye.